Hello, this is Donald Jenkins, your Master Purpose Development Coach, CEO of the Purpose Development Institute in Atlanta, Georgia, and welcome to the Digital Warfare Conference introduction video. I am super excited that you are taking time out of your busy schedule to get some very important insight that I'm sure that by the end of this video, you're going to find to be of tremendous value as to why you need to attend a digital warfare conference. So make sure that you share this video with all the pastors in your network, the preachers in your network, the leaders that are in your church. Everyone need to be a part of the digital warfare conference because it is one of the most consequential conferences that you will ever attend. So let me set the tone for what I'm going to be sharing in this video. And that is that the last thing that I want to do is to waste your time duplicating what you're already doing. Time is important. So I want to make sure that you understand what we're able to bring to you and the leaders that are in your church and to your church, the insight that God has prepared us for to help us understand how to win in the age of artificial intelligence and smartphone technology. So make sure that you have a pen, piece of paper, take copious notes because this is going to be extremely important, specifically from one ministry leader to the next. A little bit about my background is that I've been in ministry for almost 40 years. So just like you, I've seen a lot, but I've also spent some time, on the corporate side, programming robots and automation and technology, information system. So I understand a little bit about, what I'm talking about. In other words, I've actually written the first algorithm to train or to disciple artificial intelligence. So this is not just your typical how to use AI conference. Those conferences are in the thousands out there. This is one of the only conferences in the world where you're going to learn how to disciple artificial intelligence so that now artificial intelligence can work to help you build the vision that God has called you to build. And that's the reason why it's important for you to be there, because the consequences for not discipling the machine in this time that we're in is tremendous. The people in your church, they're going to suffer from that. So that leads me to this thought, and that is that there's a flood in your church. I know you're probably wondering, what do you mean there's a flood in my church? Yep, that's right. Care how big your church is, how small it is, there is a flood in your church. Now, you and I both know that the church itself is not the building. The church is the people. The people is the church. All right. And they are undergoing a flood right now. It's called a digital flood. They're being flooded out with algorithmic influence. They're being flooded out with one thing that you probably have never heard of before, and that is called industrialized disobedience. That's right. This stuff is being engineered now. Disobedience has been engineered. This is stuff that you're preaching against, week in and week out. So you got this flood of industrialized disobedience coming through the smartphone technology powered by artificial intelligence. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to do it? Are you going to pray about it? You're just going to preach harder, get a little oil and pour it on the people. Those things are great. And I commend us for being able to have access to do those things. But in this season, we're going to have to upgrade our skills. We have to upgrade our skills to make sure that we can understand how to minimize the risk of industrialized disobedience with the people that God has called us to minister to. And this is the reason why God is raising up the digital warfare conferences all over the world, because it's a specialized skill set, that we teach in this age. See, we've gotten away with just not being able to or having to do these types of things for years. But when artificial intelligence came online in November of 2022, the game changed. The landscape of preaching changed. It will never be the same again. And this is the reason why it's time for you to elevate your skill, because there's a flood in your church. I'm reminded of the scripture in Isaiah 59, verse 19, when it says that when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will raise up a standard against it. Well, what do you think that the standard that God is raising up in this season? It's called digital warfare. It is a standard to stand against the flood, the digital flood, industrialized disobedience that your people have to contend with every day. Did you know that the people in your church, they spend more time on their smartphone than they do in church? They have more touches on their smartphone than they do their Bible. And this is the reason why it's important for you to elevate your skills in this season, because you don't want to be in a position to where, you're preaching hard, week in and week out. And from one preacher, ministry leader to the next, I understand the grind of having to have a message week in and week out. But you're preaching hard. But here's one thing that you probably have not understood. And that is that there's what we call the edge of the human experience. This is where the people that you minister to, they're living on that edge. And here's what tech giants have done. They make sure that they're spending billions of dollars to make sure that their technology can live with the people that you are ministering to, meaning that they're going to wake up with that technology. They're going to go to bed with that technology. And as a result, the bandwidth for that technology to pull them toward the culture is growing every day. It continues to grow. It continues to grow. And the only way that you can shrink that bandwidth is that you have to have digital warfare skills. The more you elevate your digital warfare skill and help other people elevate their digital warfare skills, you begin to shrink that bandwidth of the people that you minister to being poured toward their culture, because you're expanding the bandwidth for them to be poured toward their calling. You preach that every week, but you have to have digital warfare skills to expand that bandwidth at the edge of the human experience, where they live on their smartphone. Again, they're spending more time on their smartphone than they are in church. And this is the reason why it's important for you to be in the digital warfare conference, because I'm going to teach you how to disciple the machine. And by discipling the machine, you're going to be able to close down that bandwidth of them being poured toward their culture and expand the bandwidth of the people that you're ministering to being poured toward their call. In other words, you're going to be able to disciple the machine. That's right. In this season, you can't just disciple the people, but you have to also be able to disciple the machine so that you can improve that bandwidth of the people in your church being poured toward their calling. So God bless you. I look forward to seeing you in the Digital Warfare Conference.